There is one thing that is troubling my mind as a Kenyan on the economic front. And it's something, I am not saying it to accuse anyone. I'm saying it because it is important. If you read the central bank data, it shows that the Kenyan economy, we have now borrowed. Our national debt is now over 12.1 trillion Kenya shillings. For the last 3 years, our country has borrowed in excess of 3.5 trillion Kenya shillings. So I would want to request all of us as the leadership, and especially those who have the opportunity to make decisions in the executive. Let us serve our country with dedication. And let us not seek to give good narratives out there when the Kenyan economy is actually being teared down or torn down. We have borrowed over 3.5 trillion Kenya shillings in 3 years. President Kibaki borrowed 1.2 trillion in the entire 10 years he was president. And therefore we have borrowed 3 times in 3 years. We have borrowed 3 times what Kibaki borrowed in 10 years. That's the money Kenya has borrowed in the last 3 years alone. 3 times what Kibaki borrowed in 10 years. And in that money I have not included other debts that Kenya has now become clever to borrow in the name of something called securitization. I have not mentioned even that. It therefore means the economy of Kenya is borrowing 100 billion every month. And every single day, when the lights go off, every day, every single day, Kenya is borrowing 3.4 billion every day. That we are borrowing in a minute. You can do the calculations and see. In an hour, maybe we are borrowing around 137 every 1 hour. I'm saying this because we are now headed to the elections. And what governments do, they focus more on re-election, and we forget that we have a country to lead after the elections. And what that means is that every time we are nearing elections, we start having something called fiscal expansion. Because maybe there is nothing much to be seen for the past year, then in basically 1 year, we want everything to be seen. And therefore, what do? We become reckless in borrowing. Kenya is there now. That now our debt is 12 trillion Kenya shillings. I want to request that we do not have to put our country in that kind of pedestal in terms of borrowing. Kenya has always had development for the many years, but we never had to borrow that much. President Kibaki did a lot of development. He borrowed only 1.2 trillion for 10 years. Where is the 1.2 trillion we are borrowing every year going? To make the matter worse, anything you see with your mouth, with your eyes, sorry for that. Maybe the mouth is what is also being used somewhere. So I shouldn't say sorry. Let me paraphrase that. Everything you see with your eyes happening in Kenya now, in terms of development, what you can see, for example, the expansion of this Keno Marwa Road, is not even part of the 12 trillion borrowed. Is another loan on the side called fuel levy securitization. Everything else you see in Kenya in terms of development, like even the Talanta Stadium, is also not part of the 12 trillion debt. That is another debt, securitization of the sports fund, where we borrowed 46 billion and we'll be paying 100 billion in interest rate alone after 15 years. Even the expansion of Nairobi-Nakuru Road is also not part of the 12 trillion we have borrowed. That is NSSF money being used as a PPP to build that road. I request those who are in government, you have already borrowed 1.2 trillion every year. And even what we can see with our eyes is actually not part of that borrowing. Please, kuweni na huruma ya nchi ya Kenya. Even as we preside over the affairs of our country, let us be, tujue kwa akili zetu ya kwamba there is Kenya after elections. Let us not run our country in terms of overheating it. We must avoid to become like Sri Lanka. We must avoid to become like Ghana. We must avoid to become like Ethiopia. We must avoid to become like Zambia in the recent years. Because Kenya is a strong country with internal resources. This issue of profligate borrowing must come to an end if we really care about this country. Asanteni sana, Mungu awabariki.